Welcome back to Honest Straightforward Reviews. After getting a lot of messages in regards to silicon lottery and what's the meaning of it, and you might have come across this term yourself while browsing the internet and watching videos in regards to CPUs and GPUs, or when you're trying to get information about overclocking your CPU or GPU. In today's episode, I'll be explaining as to what is silicon lottery and why I do not focus on overclocking results for products that I review. Before one can understand what silicon lottery is, one has to understand how GPUs and CPUs are manufactured. GPUs and CPUs are fabricated from silicon. Silicon is first purified, then cut into something called wafers. The wafers are fitted with hundreds of CPU or GPU dies containing transistors after many fabrication processes. This process is not perfect, and hence there are variation in the quality of CPUs and GPUs silicon wafers due to errors being found in them when being subjected to various procedures during their construction. This is where a process comes about called binning. What is binning? Binning is a process by which manufacturers of CPUs, GPUs, and RAM categorize them according to their quality and performance of the silicon wafer. Every single CPU, GPU, and RAM that is being manufactured will need to adhere to specific standards set by the manufacturer in regards to their performance in voltage, power consumption, clock speed, heat output, etc. These standards may vary upon the architecture of the component. Not all of them satisfy those standards due to the complexity and errors involved in the creation process. These components are divided according to their quality and placed into various bins. If a component is satisfying all standards, it will be placed in a bin containing good quality components. If it does not, they get placed in a lower quality bin. The quality and performance of these components dictate the price accordingly. For example, considering AMD's Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, and Ryzen 7 processors, AMD has set a few standards like defining clock speed, a certain number of cores, defining voltage, TDP, etc. for the Ryzen 5 processors. If any processor fails to adhere to these standards, it'll be binned in a Ryzen 3 processor. If it satisfies their standards, it'll be binned in a Ryzen 5 processor. If it exceeds their standards and meets the standards of a Ryzen 7 processor, it'll be binned as a Ryzen 7 processor. So if you're using a Ryzen 3 processor, it could have been a Ryzen 5, but it couldn't meet the manufacturer's expectations. Binning amongst processor is of the same model is also common. For example, the highest quality binned i9s will be sold as an unlocked K series. They have more clock speed and produce less heat. You will be able to overclock them sufficiently than their locked counterparts. So the i9-10900K is binned higher than an ordinary i9-10900. This exact process of binning is also used for GPUs as well, making it quite common to see different graphic cards running on the same GPU. They will have different clock speed, different power consumption values, different cores, etc. due to binning. For example, the GPU used in RTX 3070, RTX 3070 Ti, RTX 3080, the RTX 3080 will have more number of cores available working on a higher clock speed than the RTX 3070. The RTX 3070 could have become a RTX 3080 if it could have met the manufacturer's expectations. Binning amongst graphic cards of the same model is also common. You might have noticed the same graphic cards being sold at different clock speeds at different prices, though they are manufactured in the same way. They will have differences in their performance due to the minute complications involved in their manufacturing process. For example, an RTX 3080 Extreme Gaming OC will be more expensive than a RTX 3080. The former has a higher clock speed and offers more performance, hence it will be binned higher than the latter. One could be forgiven for thinking they could enable the disabled cores on the CPUs or GPUs and make them functions on par with their higher bin components. Although this was possible many years ago through some BIOS tricks, firmware updates, etc. But these days the manufacturers physically disable connections between insufficient or inactive cores and the rest of the processors, so they cannot be used at all by the consumer. You might be asking yourself, what does this have to do with honest, straightforward reviews not offering overclock results? Which brings me to the next part of the aforementioned question. What is silicon lottery? As I've told you earlier, CPUs, RAMs, and GPUs will be sorted and binned according to their performance and quality. If you pick two identical CPUs or GPUs from the same bin, compare them and compare their overclocking performance, both of them will not be exactly equal in their performance even though they are of the same model. One will perform slightly better than the other. This is called the silicon lottery. This happens because of the minute complexities involved in manufacturing these components. Their performance will not precisely hit the mark of the manufacturer's expectations. It will vary by a small value. For example, you and your friend might buy a RTX 3080 Extreme graphics card. You can be sure that you and your friend is buying a higher bin graphic card. But when you overclock them, both of you will be able to overclock it at different extents. This is because of the silicon lottery. If you could overclock it better than your friend, it means you've won the silicon lottery. You have a slightly better graphic card than your friend even though you both paid the same price for it. The same can be said for CPUs as well. Let's say both you and your friend bought a unlocked i7-10700K CPU. When you overclock them, you and your friend will have different results in overclocking even though they are from a higher bin set of CPUs. This happens because of the minute complexities involved in CPU manufacturing. It is also called a lottery because you are in a game of chance. You may or may not hit that lottery. Also, there is not much to lose if you do not win the lottery. Though the gains and losses are noticeable, they're not a tipping point. In the case of CPUs, the extra gain you get by maximum overclocking can reach between 0.1 GHz to 0.3 GHz. In some extreme cases, you might be able to get a difference of 0.5 GHz. In the case of graphic cards, they may range between plus or minus 50 MHz in most cases. If you could boost the clock speeds more than 75 MHz, consider yourself lucky. Alright guys, that brings me to the end of the video. I hope now that you've seen the video, you know a bit more about silicon lottery if you didn't before, or if you didn't, you know a bit more on other things, and it'll help you understand why I don't have overclocking results when I am pitting CPUs and GPUs and RAMs against each other and things like that. Thank you for watching. I do a lot of videos. Please do subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications. Also consider following me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Take care. Bye-bye.